कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः
यस्य नाहङ्कृतो भावो बुद्धिर्यस्य न लिप्यते हत्वापि स इमान् लोकान् न हन्ति न निबध्यते. So this should be the mindset where we don't have the kartritva and bhoktritva. Our intelligence is freed of the lepana of our constrictions. Then even we have to kill the whole world, that will not bind us. We will not be hindered by anything. We will not be constricted by anything, whatever we have to do. With that we started, and we came to the Arjuna's mindset in how it became humble. Initially it was egoistic. That was not the proper situation where a person can give spiritual message. So initially Krishna had to chide him, had to admonish him and make Arjuna understand his real state. Then Arjuna becomes humble, and that is the great shloka on which the whole gospel is based. What was it? Karpanya dosho apahata svabhavaha pritchami tvam dharma sammudha cetaha yascheyasya nishchitam bruhitan me शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधिमां त्वां प्रपन्नम् कार्पण्यदोषोऽपहतः स्वभावः पृच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचेताः यच्छ्रेयस्यात् निश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधिमां त्वां प्रपन्नम्. So we discussed that at this point it is the awakening of the discipleship of Arjuna. He said that, "Oh Krishna, I am not interested in anything at all in this kingdom. Nothing will be able to remove this condition of depression. So I take refuge in you. I am absolutely confused about dharma, adharma. Please guide me. Please tell me, what am I supposed to do? I am your disciple. I have taken refuge in you. And whatever you say, you give me your discipline. Whatever you say, I am ready to do that." When Arjuna expressed this mindset of the disciple, then Krishna starts giving him the message of this truth, of this eternal immortality of the soul. We will find that right in this second chapter, the beginning of Bhagavad Gita itself, the highest truth is spoken of. It is called Sankhya Yoga, where the universality of the soul is presented, where the oneness, the transcendental truth about the soul is presented. And what is the reason that right in the beginning the highest truth in its most enlightening form is presented? Because when this truth is spoken by a realized person, a knower of truth, then although the disciple's mind and intelligence is not yet ready to realize the truth, but directly it gets a touch of the truth by the knowledge radiated by the knower. The disciple feels the expansion, the elevation, the subtlety. He gets rid of the depressive state of his mind. So to remove the depression of Arjuna, to put him into a receptive state, this first exposure of the Sankhya Yoga was extremely important. And Krishna talks about it right in the beginning. He gives the message of the soul right in the beginning. Of course, as we will find that after listening to it, Arjuna puts up a question that if you say that this knowledge is much higher than any activity, then why, Krishna, you are putting me in this ghora karma, in this tremendously involving, engrossing activity of the war, can I not take to this knowledge pursuit and attain liberation? Krishna says no, because you are not yet fit for this exclusive jnana-nishtha, this kevala jnana-nishtha, exclusive pursuit of knowledge. You have to be engaged in the activity. And what activity you can be engaged in? Because by your nature, by your profession, you are a fighter. So fighting is your activity, but no activity can be a hindrance to this spiritual goal. It's a great opportunity where this ghora karma, this tremendously involving activity of fighting the war, you can utilize to expand your mind, make it freed of all its constrictions, its small attachments, its repulsions, its hatred, its enmity. Everything can be overcome by taking to this activity with a changed mindset. So the second chapter is basically the Sankhya Yoga, where Krishna tells about the immortality of our soul. He says, it's quite long, some of the shlokas we will do. He says, न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे नैनं छिन्दन्ति शस्त्राणि नैनं दहति पावकः न चैनं क्लेदयन्त्यापो न शोषयति मारुतः अच्छेद्योऽयमदाह्योऽयम् अक्लेद्यो अशोष्य एव च नित्यः सर्वगतस्थाणुः अचलोऽयं सनातनः न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. He says that in reality our soul is immortal. We are immortal. We don't know this truth, but when we look into ourselves and find out where from this I in us is coming, when we discover this real identity of ourselves, then we understand that we are immortal. This soul or the self which we are, which is our real identity, it never gets born, it never dies, it never undergoes any change at all. It is beyond time, it is beyond space, it is transcending time, it is transcending space, it is transcending all material transformation, because it is not a material product. This soul, the consciousness, the I in us, the observer of the entire universe. Not only that, the whole universe, as we observe, the universe is appearing in this consciousness. There is nothing but this consciousness and consciousness alone. When we identify ourselves with this consciousness, we understand that while participating in this changeful, variegated world, in this infinite variety, in infinite changefulness, we are never touched by any of the changes around. We are never contaminated by the dross of the world. We remain as pure, as pristine, as more than the space even. Space is also within the material ken. So it is even transcending space. Space is what? It is a concept of our mind. It is transcending all the concepts of mind. That is what we are. He says, Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha. We are thinking that we are killing, but what is happening is it is all in the nature. One body is killing the other, but the soul never gets touched by it. The soul can never be burned, the soul can never be penetrated. It is Nityaha Sarvagataha Sthanuhu Achalaha Sanatanaha. Nityaha means it transcends time. It is not precise when we say it is present all the time, because we are not able to get beyond the concept of time. We are thinking that it is every time it is present. Well, it is present all the time. There is no beginning, there is no end. But the fact is that time is a concept in the consciousness. The consciousness is far transcending time. So it transcends time. It is Nityaha. It is Sarvagataha. It is all pervading. The moment we say it is all pervading, we will think that as the air pervades, like that, this is also something which is percolating in the entire universe. It is spreading into the entire universe. So there is a concept, material concept of movement involved in it when we say Sarvagataha or all pervading. Actually, it is not that. So immediately he says Sthanuhu, so that we don't think that by Sarvagata there is a movement involved. So immediately he said Sthanuhu, that means it is stable. There is no motion there at all. There is no question of it spreading into other things, because all other things, the entire universe is appearing in this. All the concepts of movement, all the concepts of change, they are all formed in the consciousness, which is beyond all changes, beyond all movements. He says Achalaha. What is this Sthanuhu and again Achalaha? Sthanuhu is, it is not, there is no movement in it, in its parts. And Achalaha means as a mass also, as a whole thing. That, see, when I say mass also, there is a material concept involved in. That is why we always say that this soul can never be expressed. It is always beyond expression. But we have to use expression from the world of duality. Without that we cannot express anything. So as a whole also, it never moves. Suppose we often compare with the Big Bang theory and all. Big Bang, in the Big Bang theory we conceive of the whole universe expanding. As a whole it is expanding. That means space also expanding. Where there is no universe, there is no space. So space also expanding. Here he says no, not as a whole also there cannot be any expansion at all. Actually there is no question of any such movement involved in this. Achalaha, ayam sanatanaha. It is causeless. Even if you look for it is eternal, it is the most ancient, and calling it ancient also is not true. Because if you say that it is the earliest thing, then also the concept of time is involved. It is beyond causality, so it is beyond time also. Time is a concept appearing in the consciousness. This truth of our soul, it transcends time, causality, space and matter. Such is the great conception of the truth. Can you imagine that this was thought and discovered by our rishis? How many thousands of years ago we don't know. Maybe 10,000, 20,000. It could be even 1 million, because it is prehistoric. And as far back our scriptures, the oldest scriptures also, we find these thoughts in its most mature form. In this form it is appearing there. We don't know how long it took to arrive at this mature form of thinking. Can you imagine the greatness of this civilization? Not understanding anything, we are looking at the material civilization and aping all the lucrative aspects of the material civilization. Can we not look back to our heritage and at least try to understand what our forefathers thought and what great treasure they have given me, which is lying like a nidhi covered underneath our floor. We never care to open the floor and find out what is kept by the forefathers underneath. We don't know. Even when we are told about it, we don't care to know it because we don't value it. Bhagavad Gita says, Shraddha mayoyam purushaha yo yat shraddhaha saeva saha. A person is nothing but the embodiment of his shraddha. What is this shraddha? Shraddha means whatever we value. Suppose for us the value of money is very great, then we will always think about money, how to get more money, how to become still richer. Our mind will be full of the thoughts of money. So although outward I may do anything, I might be a professor, I might be an engineer, I might be a laborer or whatever, inside my mind I am made of money. So actually, truly speaking, I am embodying money. Shraddha mayaha ayam purushaha yo yat shraddhaha sa eva saha. A person becomes whatever his shraddha is. He is an embodiment of his shraddha. So unless we may say God, 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 we may call it God, call God or this truth as supreme. But have we put this supreme position in our life? If something happens in the family, in our office, or even in interaction with the friends, immediately we forget God. We are only interested in all those things. Suppose remembering God, even if we are doing puja for about half an hour to remember God. But if there is a marriage or there is anything where the family gets busy, we forget. If the first thing we leave is our puja or meditation or our sadhana, even who have taken initiation, the disciples who are supposed to pursue Brahma Vidya, the first thing they will miss is the practicing the yoga advised, the shasana given by their guru. That means we have not given the spiritual pursuit the supreme position in life. We may do anything, but while doing anything, we must not forget that our goal, our ultimate goal, our ultimate purpose is to reach this goal. And what is this goal? It is our true identity, that is what we are. We are not giving the spiritual growth or the spiritual fruition, the supreme position in life. If we give supreme position to this supreme, then naturally all other things will become redundant. But we never do it. See, in all major religions of the world, as far as I know, everywhere God is considered to be omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. What does it mean? It means He is all pervading, present everywhere. He is all knowing. He knows everything, whatever is happening in the universe, in our mind, in our life. And He is omnipotent. That means He is all powerful. That means whatever is happening in the universe, whatever is happening in our life, everything is done by God alone. I think this concept is common in all religions, but do we inquire into this concept and think whether our thoughts are following these concepts? Suppose God is all pervading, He is omnipresent, everywhere He is present. Then why do we go to the temple and worship? Why do we have to go to the puja room and only before the murti we have to worship? Or forget about worshipping or idol worshipping or going to the temple, even otherwise. We think that God is somewhere else, sitting in the sky, somewhere unknown. We don't remember that God is right. If He is everywhere, He is right within me also. In fact, in spirituality, finally we discovered that He is the very essence of our existence. He is the I we are talking about. The I we are always using, not knowing that that is the supreme, that is the God we are talking about. So how foolish we are in thinking about God in a limited, constricted manner. But hardly we pay any. Even when we know about it, then also we will find the moment we are in difficulty or we are thinking of God, our mind goes to somewhere else. We cannot think that He is right within me, He is myself. We cannot think about it. Even if we don't consider Him to be myself, at least we should understand that He is in me. And where can I touch Him best? I can come in touch with Him in our own within, rather than going out to the space and meeting God anywhere. If we see God, even we see God when there is a vision, we find that God has appeared before me. That means He is present only where I am seeing Him. Outside that He is not there. He is not all pervading. Everywhere we are contradicting this concept. Similarly, He is omniscient. He knows everything. Then why do we pray? Do we have to pray that, oh God, save me from this? God knows that we are in trouble. If He knows and He wants to save, He will save. He knows our thoughts before we come to know of our thoughts also. He knows what good things are there, what bad things are there in our mind. Everything He knows. Then why do we have to specially pray? We don't think about it. I am not saying that you should not do puja or you should not pray. It is necessary because that is how, for our personality also it is necessary that at least during the puja we will think of it and it will be a treatment delivered to our mind. When we are praying, we are getting strength. Whatever is our faith, whatever is our belief, that is producing the strength in our mind. So it has the personal benefit, that is fine. But I am only pointing out the contradiction in our thoughts. We say that He is omnipotent, He is doing everything, everything is done by God. Then, when I have lost somebody, when I have lost maybe all the relatives, when we have lost our business, when we have lost money, we have nothing to take refuge to, then why do we cry and wail and repeatedly beseech God that what have you done to me? So many other people are there, why I am punished? All these things, how can we do? Whatever has happened to our life, it has been done by God. So it has happened with His knowledge, with His intention. So if I believe that He is omnipotent, then can we not accept anything happening to our life? So although in the religion also these concepts are very much there, but we are not thinking, we are not going into the concepts. If we really inquire into these concepts, then religion will upgrade into spirituality and we will become spiritual seekers. We can pursue our spiritual seeking. Now this concept of the oneness of our soul, Krishna presents in so many shlokas in a beautiful manner. But generally we find that we have difficulty because we think that I am enclosed by my body, mind, personality. So whenever we are speaking about soul or consciousness or Brahman, we have a difficulty in understanding and grasping the truth because our habituated engagement with the limited, constricted material world, everything we deal with is limited. Everything is changeful, everything has a birth and a death. So we cannot think of that something which is transcending time, transcending birth, transcending death, transcending all changes. I will give a very simple example because about soul everybody has difficulty in understanding. Let us think of a small radio receiver or a transistor set. Suppose the station, the radio station, the local radio station is broadcasting the program. Are not the electromagnetic waves flowing past everywhere through my body also, through everywhere in the atmosphere? Are they not present? But we are not coming to know because there is no manifestation of that electromagnetic wave. When we tune the radio, suddenly from the radio, the radio starts producing the music or the talk or whatever is broadcast from the radio station. Now, suppose some circuit breaks in the radio. There is a small disconnection anywhere or one element has gone bad. Immediately the manifestation of the sound stops, the broadcast stops. But do you mean to say that the electromagnetic waves are still not passing through the radio? Are they not passing still through the antenna? But we are not seeing any manifestation. This is exactly what death means. Just like the radio dying because of one element becoming malfunctional, the radio waves, the broadcast waves are no more manifest. Just like that, when in our body a small something goes out of order and the body is no longer able to manifest the consciousness, we fall dead. The body falls dead. The body is so much more complicated than the radio. Anytime, anything can happen. A small something going wrong in the brain, I may fall dead the next moment, but we don't remember. In fact, our poets say that it is rather surprising that we are living. There is no surprise in death because the body is so complicated in its structure. Any time we may fall dead, but it is surprising that we are not dying. How the whole system is somehow managing to live. The life itself is a surprise, death is not at all a surprise. So, this soul, that oneness of the soul, university of the soul, we have to understand. We have to make our buddhi subtle. We have to take it to more and more abstract level to grasp the truth of our real identity. That is why I said, Yoga Vasishtha says, Vicharat tikshnatametya dhihi pashyati param padam dirgha samsara rogasya vicharo hi mahaushadham. That the great medicine, mahaushadha, for this samsara roga of always getting deluded by the multiplicity of the world, that roga, that disease, the mahaushadha for that is vichara. Vichara means comparing between the nitya and anitya, between the permanent and the impermanent, between the consciousness and the inert, by comparing with the Atma and Anatma. What is the Atma, who is the seer of everything, the knower of everything, and what is the Anatma, which is the object, what is the subject and what is the object. All these vivekas are constituting of vichara or introspection. They are all called vivekas. Nitya nitya vastu viveka, Atma anatma viveka, Chit jada viveka. Chit means conscious, jada means inert. Chit jada viveka. All these vicharas, they take our mind and intelligence to a subtler and subtler level to grasp the truth of this one universal soul, on which the whole universe, along with the my body, mind personality, which is a small speck in the universe, the whole universe is appearing to be in that consciousness.